She didn't even ask. My sister-in-law sneered, her voice loud enough for every single person at the high-end table to hear. "She just ordered," she commanded, and immediately the entire table erupted into mocking laughter while my husband's parents giggled like I was some lowly employee who had forgotten her place. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of standing your ground. My husband, Daniel, looked away. No one intervened. Not a single person even flinched in my defense. But I didn't laugh. I looked around that room at people draped in silk and fueled by smugness, all waiting for me to pull out my card like I always did. But this time I didn't. I stood up slowly, placed both hands on the table, and said just one sentence. Silence flooded the room. The laughter died, and every eye stayed glued to me. That was the moment everything changed. And if you think this story is about money, you're wrong. It's about dignity. I used to think marrying into the Crawford family would finally make me part of something solid. They obsessed over tradition, appearances, and the desperate need to act like everything was perfect. I came from a modest home where holiday chairs didn't match, and the plates were secondhand. For them, perfection meant curated table decorations and a 3-course meal for 7 on a random Tuesday. When I married Daniel, I told myself I could learn their rhythm, that they'd eventually stop treating me like an outsider if I was just quiet enough, gave enough, and smiled at the right moments. But they never did. The first few times I covered the check at family dinners, it was subtle. "Oh, Emily, you work in finance. You've got this. You're just so good with numbers, honey." It didn't bother me then. It felt generous, adult, and useful. But then it became an expectation. If someone forgot their wallet, it was always at a meal I was invited to. When the bill came, it never landed in front of the others. Every eye turned to me like it was a joke we all knew. But I wasn't laughing. At first, I made excuses. I told myself they were just unorganized, or maybe I really was the right one to handle things. Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table and whisper, "Thanks, Em, you're great." But slowly, his thank yous stopped, and his hand stopped reaching for mine. That's when I realized I wasn't helping, I was being used. It wasn't just dinners. It was birthday gifts, spa vouchers, hotel reservations, and down payments for vacations. His sister Madison once accidentally booked a weekend in Aspen and put my name on the bill, texting, "Hope you don't mind, it's just easier this way, right?" And I paid. Every single time. I kept thinking if I gave more, they'd see me differently. That the money I spent would buy me more than a polite nod and a condescending smile. Instead, I got silence when I needed support. Like the night I was promoted to vice president. We were all at dinner, and when the announcement went live online, I looked around the table, smiling expectantly. No one said a word. Not Daniel, not his parents, not Madison. It was as if a woman's success only counted in their world if she got it through marriage or inheritance. That night, I paid the bill again and went home with a lump in my throat and a credit card receipt for $1,380. But I wasn't ready to leave yet. Not then. Daniel wasn't a bad person, and that's what made it hard. He was gentle, funny in a quiet way, and he loved his family, maybe too much. I knew he'd never raise his voice against them, but I didn't realize how much he'd lower his voice for me. When we moved in together, I saw the subtle signs. Bank accounts he kept in his mother's name, for emergencies, and his constant hesitation when I brought up setting boundaries with Madison. He'd just rub his face, sigh, and say, "They're just used to things being a certain way." That way meant every family gathering revolved around his parents' preferences. If I suggested a different restaurant or a simpler party, I was met with awkward silence or a forced smile that never reached their eyes. Still, I stayed. I helped cook. I decorated for birthdays. I made the Christmas shopping list so no one was forgotten. One Christmas, I stayed up until 3:00 a.m. wrapping 7 gifts that didn't have a single tag with my name on it. I laughed it off when Madison called me a handy little elf, but it hurt more than I admitted. I bought my mother-in-law a leather handbag she'd admired in a magazine. It was $200 even on sale. She opened it, smiled thinly, and said, "What a nice knockoff." Before Daniel turned to the next box, he saw my face. He didn't defend me. He just whispered, "Don't take it personally. She's just particular." Particular? That was his word for whenever they excluded me. When they posted group photos I wasn't invited to, or when they accidentally reserved brunch for 6 instead of 7. But the worst part wasn't what they did. It was what I allowed. I thought if I held on long enough, earned enough, and paid enough, they'd stop treating me like a temporary guest. I was wrong. Over time, I felt myself getting smaller. Not on the outside. I still smiled, still brought the wine, still kept my gold card in my purse just in case someone forgot. But inside, my self-worth, my dignity, and my voice were crumbling. Still, I told myself I just had to get through the next event. I decided that event would be the night everything collapsed. The family party where Madison barked for the check. The night the jokes stopped and I stood up. But before we get to that, you have to understand the cost I had already paid. I started keeping a ledger. Not out loud, not in a spreadsheet yet, but in my head. A mental cash book, line by line. Every time a bill was handed to me with a smile, every time Madison forgot her card, every time my name was left out of a thank you post despite me paying for half the event. At first, it was just a weight in my chest, a quiet itch behind my ribs whispering, "This isn't right." But I suppressed it, telling myself this is what family does, they stick together. But that wasn't true, was it? Because support isn't a one-way street. I started noticing the imbalance in small, sharp moments. Like when I had the flu and had to cancel brunch with the in-laws. No one checked on me. But when I didn't show up the following week with the promised cupcakes for my niece's birthday, Madison texted, "Wow, thanks for canceling. Real classy. No, hope you feel better." She was just disappointed I wasn't there to decorate her kid's party for free. Then there was the Napa Valley trip my mother-in-law organized. She accidentally booked one room too few. Guess who ended up on a pull-out couch in the suite while Madison and her husband had a king bed with a vineyard view? They said I was so relaxed and easygoing. What they meant was I never complained. I never said no, until I started whispering it to myself. No. I don't deserve to be treated like a credit card. No, this isn't what love feels like. No, I won't keep pretending just so you can be comfortable. Finally, the list in my head became a reality. One night after paying for a dinner Daniel forgot to plan for, I opened my laptop. I made columns, date, event, amount, beneficiary, 3 years, 78 events, over $91,000, and those were just the receipts I still had. I stared at the number. It didn't make me angry, it just made me tired. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Daniel and realized they didn't love who I was, they loved what I gave. And I had given enough. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew that the next time they reached for my card, I'd be taking myself back instead. It was supposed to be a massive celebration. Daniel's parents were renewing their vows after 40 years, a huge dinner at the city's most expensive steakhouse. The invitation came on gold-embossed cardstock. Madison had texted me a week before. "You're coming, right? Mom expects everything to be perfect. Can we count on you for the wine again?" No, hello, no thanks. Just an assumption. I stared at that text for a full minute before replying, "Sure." Then I added a new line to my spreadsheet. I wore black that night, not to be petty, but to be invisible, still and observant. Madison wore bold red, acting like she was at a coronation. My mother-in-law was covered in pearls. Daniel adjusted his cufflinks 3 times before we left, radiating the nervousness of a boy about to fail a test he never studied for. The restaurant was draped in candlelight and luxury, white linens, crystal glasses, waiters in bow ties. A jazz trio played in the corner. The Crawfords had filled 2 long tables with family friends and distant acquaintances I didn't even know. No one noticed me standing alone at the end of the table pouring my own water while everyone else laughed in groups. As the courses were served, steak, wine, lobster, cake, the mood rose. Toasts were made. Madison made sure to name every family member who contributed to the event. My name was never mentioned, which I expected. What I didn't expect was what happened next. The waiter brought the bill in a small leather folder and set it in the middle of the table. Madison grabbed it first, skimmed the total, and theatrically arched an eyebrow. "Oh, wow," she laughed, holding it up like a prop. "Who knew love cost this much?" She turned to me, shoved the folder toward my face, and said it like a command. "Pay up, now." The table erupted in laughter. My father-in-law chuckled. My husband looked away. My mother-in-law didn't even stop sipping her champagne. The joke had landed, and I was the punchline. But this time I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. I took my napkin, folded it slowly, and laid it over my plate. Then I stood up. My chair scraped against the marble floor just enough to silence the room. Madison was still grinning, daring me to make a scene, but I didn't need to raise my voice. I had brought something more powerful than words. I had brought the truth. I didn't pay the bill. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick white envelope I'd sealed that morning. I held it up, letting its weight speak for itself. "You want me to pay?" I asked quietly. My voice cut through the room like a blade. "Fine, let's talk about what I've already paid." Madison rolled her eyes. "Emily, it was just a joke. Relax." But no one was laughing now. I slid the envelope across the table to her. "In there, you'll find every major expense I've covered for the last 3 years. Dinners like this, birthdays, spa weekends, flights to Napa and Charleston, even your daughter's preschool tuition. Yeah, I paid half when you said it was a tough month." My mother-in-law's glass froze halfway to her mouth. I kept going. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to know if I was just exaggerating or ungrateful like they always implied. I turned to Daniel. "Even you." He stared at me, pale and speechless. Madison opened the envelope and started flipping through the printed spreadsheets. "The total is 97,640.21, I said, "not including tonight's dinner." A murmur rippled through the room. An uncle choked on his wine. Someone whispered, "You can't be serious." But I was. I let the silence hang there. No one could pretend anymore. I turned to my in-laws, my voice firm. "You've treated me like a bank in a dress. Not a wife, not a daughter-in-law, not a family member, just a convenience. And I've allowed it for way too long." My mother-in-law's face twisted. "This is incredibly disrespectful. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm resigning." Madison hissed. "You actually counted every cent." I smiled. "Yes, because you never noticed the time, the effort, or the money. You never said thank you. You never even asked if I was okay." I grabbed the smallest gift box on the table, one I'd wrapped so carefully. "This was for you," I told my mother-in-law. "A watch that cost me an entire weekend's pay. I'm keeping it." I picked up my clutch, squared my shoulders, and looked around one last time. "This is my final contribution to the Crawford family. Daniel, I'm done. Whether you follow me or not, I'm walking out of here with my dignity, and that's more than anyone in this room ever gave me." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mother reached for his arm, ready to pull him back under her control, but I was already gone. I walked to the exit, not angry, but determined. As I passed the host's stand, I turned back one last time to make sure the whole room heard. "By the way," I said, "I made the reservation. The deposit was non-refundable, so technically, you've already used me one last time tonight. Congratulations." I didn't cry in the car. I didn't blast the music or call a friend. I just drove in silence, letting the streetlights blur past. My hands were steady. My breath was even. I had finally stepped out of someone else's life and back into my own. That restaurant door hadn't just closed, it had sealed years of humiliation shut. When I got to my friend's place, I was exhausted. I stripped off the dress and the shoes I'd bought specifically for that night and threw them in a donation bag. I made tea and sat on the floor, watching the steam rise like smoke from something I had finally burned down. The calls started the next morning. First Daniel, missed calls, then a text. "Please just talk to me." Then his mother, "That was cruel, you shamed our family." Then Madison, "Wow, you've always been dramatic, but this is the peak." I didn't respond. By noon, Daniel was at my door. I didn't open it. He left a message, no apology, just confusion. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" I wanted to laugh. I had told him with every sigh, every unspoken plea for help, every payment I made while he looked the other way. He just hadn't listened. The funny thing is, no one ever asked why I kept paying. They just assumed I would because I always had. But people break, even the silent ones. Especially the silent ones. That weekend, I deactivated the joint card, moved my savings to a private account, and took a week off work. I needed a break from the person I had become while trying to please them. Daniel sent one last text. "I didn't know how much you were carrying. I'm sorry. I should have protected you." I stared at those words and felt nothing but peace. It wasn't about his apology. It was about the fact that I was no longer there to be used or forgotten. I spent that first week alone, enjoying a feeling I hadn't felt in years, relief. No one was asking me to settle a bill. No one was judging my ambition. No one was guilt-tripping me into showing up or paying up. I slept in. I made coffee in the silence. I walked around the block in leggings with no makeup, not caring what Madison would say about me letting myself go. I read books and listened to jazz because I liked it, not because it was dinner atmosphere. I deleted the spreadsheets from my desktop, not because the data didn't matter, but because the audit was over. The following weeks were a quiet revolution. I met up with friends I hadn't seen in months, women who had told me I'd changed since I married into that family. They were right. We had long, happy dinners where no one felt pressured, and the bill was just a bill. I remembered what it was like to be with people who didn't want anything from me but my company. I booked a solo trip to Sedona. I hiked, I slept under the stars, and I wrote things in a journal I'd been afraid to say out loud. I wanted to be accepted so badly that I let myself be erased. I thought sacrifice bought love. It only bought silence. I wasn't too much. I was just with people who gave too little. When I got back, Daniel messaged me again. I started therapy. You were right. I let them control everything, including me. It was the first time he said something that wasn't centered on his own comfort. I wished him well but didn't go back. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means choosing yourself. I started a small, quiet foundation that offers financial literacy to women trapped in relationships where money and silence are the currency. I didn't tell the Crawfords. I didn't need their approval. I built it because I could, because all that energy I used to waste on them was finally coming back to me. Months passed. The holidays came and went. I got no invite, not even a card. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. I didn't care if they apologized. I didn't need them because I had stopped hopping for a welcome and started deciding where I actually felt whole. Daniel and I signed the divorce papers on a rainy Tuesday. It was quiet and uncomplicated. No fighting, no bitterness. Just a long breath between two people who finally accepted the truth. In his family's eyes, we were never equals, and he never had the courage to change that. As he handed me the pen, he said, "You were always stronger than all of us." I didn't answer. I just signed and pushed the folder back. Some called my exit dramatic. Others called it unforgivable. I didn't care. Deep down, I knew they weren't laughing at the jokes. They were laughing that someone like me would dare to speak up. And when I finally did, they had no idea how to handle the silence that followed. I bought a modest house by the water. No marble, no showy lights, just warm wood floors and quiet mornings that belong only to me. I plant herbs on the windowsill. I cook for joy, not for performance. I stopped asking, "Will they like this?" and started asking, "Do I like this?" One afternoon, a stranger by the lake complimented my earrings. I thanked her, and she smiled, saying, "You look like someone who knows exactly who she is." For the first time, I believed it. Not because of my money or status, but because I have boundaries and the courage to keep them. I don't know if the Crawfords still talk about me. Maybe they call me ungrateful or difficult. That's fine. Let them tell whatever story helps them sleep. I know the real one, the one where I stood up in a room full of people who took me for granted and with a calm hand and a clear voice chose to leave. Not to punish them, but because I finally realized you aren't valued just because you're the one paying. It just means you're available, and I'm not available anymore.